Thank you very much for your attention. It's the same moderator, it's the same secretariat, but we have 4 new faces, experts on our panel to discuss sustainable development governance, the regional implications and perspectives for the post-Rio +20 institutional setup. As you know, the Rio +20 conference gave an important follow-up role to the UN system. The regional commissions have the mandate to coordinate the collection and compilation of regional inputs to the global process on sustainable development. This covers the process for developing sustainable development goals and the setting up of a universal intergovernmental high-level political forum that will replace the Commission on Sustainable Development. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on these issues. But with no further ado, I am now going to introduce this panel of experts. To my right is Nebojša Kaludjerović, an advisor to the Prime Minister of Montenegro for Foreign Affairs. Mr. Kaludjerović was previously Minister of Foreign Affairs and European Integration and has been the permanent representative of Montenegro to the United Nations. Enrico Giovannini is President of the Italian National Institute of Statistics and a former Chief Statistician of OECD and current Chair of the Conference of European Statisticians. Vladimir Zakharov is Director of the Institute of Sustainable Development of the Civic Chamber of the Russian Federation. He's also President of the Center for Russian Environmental Policy and a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And Jan Dusic is Acting Director and Regional Representative of the UN Environmental Programme in Europe. Previously, Mr. Dusic was the Minister of Environment of the Czech Republic and has been head of the country's delegation to numerous international organisations, including the EU, UNEP and the UNECE. So I would first like to ask Mr. Kaludjerović to start us off with his thoughts on the high-level political forum and the role of regional commissions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me first of all say how glad I am to be again in Geneva, seeing and meeting some of my old friends from all time. And I would particularly like to welcome the Executive Secretary, Mr. Sven Alkalai, and the Director General of IRENA, Mr. Amin, and to thank him for mentioning this morning his, I would agree, very, very successful visit in Montenegro. I'll try to be brief, though, you know, when we with some experience, the UN talk about being brief, usually it goes to endless stories, but I will really try to not to get to the red point, and to share with you some ideas that are under deliberation this afternoon. And the first one is dealing with desired modalities of a high-level political forum. The second is greater, I would say, vertical coordination and institutional framework of sustainable development, regional component of that. And the third one that I would like to share is the role of individual countries, and in particular small ones. The beginning of the process, as you know, often look more challenging than they later prove to be, because the beginning contains quite a lot of challenges. I would say that as far as this process is concerned, that we are not at the beginning. We are, as a matter of fact, at the beginning of a new, very important phase. But we've gone a long way, starting from original Rio summit, and there have been important lessons and guidance that we need to take care of that. First point that I'd like to share is high-level political forum. And despite the fact that all of our documents contained an emphasis of an integration of the 3 pillars of sustainable development in the experience that we have had with different institutions, in particular with Commission on Sustainable Development. That was not the case, as we all know, and I don't want to repeat that. Commission on Sustainable Development maintained to give to a large extent emphasis on ecological aspects rather than the 3-1. And in that regard, I think that the high-level political forum to be successful need to truly reflect these three pillars of the sustainable development and need to be integrated with the work of the United Nations, international agencies, particularly International Financial Organization. I would add that the work of the high-level political forum needs to prove an added value. And that is something that I would really like to emphasize to the already existing stockpiles of initiatives, institutions, sets of recommendations and visions for future development outlined by other actors. Secondly, high-level political forum needs to develop mechanisms for regular monitoring of the progress. Unfortunately, again, we lack in that during the existence of Sustainable Development Commission, the lack of strict obligation to report. And I think that we need to work in the coming months very hard to do that. And I hope that the work of the results of Open Working Group in drafting universal, concise, action-oriented sustainable development goals should and could serve on the basis of such monitoring. Second, vertical integration and the role of regional commissions. Well, I think that we all share that there is an inadequate vertical coordination mechanism that exists within the global sustainable development community. Lack of complete vertical coordination mechanism between UN and member states on the issue of sustainable development and the work of regional commissions that are still limited in their own deliberation to 1 year, which is insufficient to member states to be able to count on the commissions and to the resources centers and venues for preparatory negotiations, which in the future should be some of their main roles. I want to remind you on some experience that we had recently or in last year's more earlier mechanism that existed in DESE in New York, but it helped with some contact points of particular group of countries in getting more close contact with particular member states, regional organization that helped member states to be more organized, informative, and to perform their own duties in a better way. The role of regional commissions is something that we would definitely need to address, and their role should be definitely strengthened with two objectives. First is to bring about greater consolidation of national inputs to the global deliberation and to be able to continue monitoring the process, the progress member states are making in achieving sustainability. There is one more aspect of this, but I don't want to expand much on it, that is sub-regional context and sub-regions, but maybe we can talk about that later on, because experience that exists in many regions, particularly in my own, Montenegro is a small country, it's a Mediterranean country, a Southeast European country, Central European country with different regional initiatives that in this context might be streamlined and to be put in motion in this regard as well. And the third one is national input that is equally important. So when we talk about division between small and big and more developed and less developed countries, well, I think that it becomes increasingly less clear and tangible. Every country has its own responsibility. And I would, again, just to mention some of the development that happened in my country last 13 years. We've been very much involved in developing this policy from the very beginning, even at the time when Montenegro was just a part of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. We participated in the Johannesburg summit at the level of the president. and continue strengthening or building institutions devoted to the sustainable development, establish National Council for Sustainable Development, then establish Office for Sustainable Development with the mandate to serve as a secretariat for this. Then 2 years ago, the office has been integrated into the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism as a division for the support of National Council for Sustainable Development, adopted National Strategy for Sustainable Development, and so on and so forth. And lastly, but equally important, and I will finish my intervention with this, and that is that my country has launched an initiative to establish Center for Sustainable Development as an important new element in the National Institutional Framework for Sustainable Development. The center will have two main goals: to bridge the science policy gap by focusing on the policy applications of research, and to serve as a knowledge center to all stakeholders nationally and internationally. And why I am mentioning this in this context, because the center will be a national institution, the first stage, hopefully, but from the very onset, the center will have a regional outlook, and hopefully, again, in time, that we hope that it might become of regional importance. And I hope I've been brief. Thank you very much.
Beautifully brief. Thank you very much on the lessons learnt from the Commission of Sustainable Development and how this new high-level political forum must add value. And of course, we wait to hear more about your Centre for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for those remarks. I will now move on to Mr. Giovannini, who's going to talk about the importance of measuring progress in sustainable development and the contribution statisticians can make to the development of the proposed Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, especially because within the UNECE Conference of European Statisticians, we have been working for years on trying to transform the fantastic wording of the Brundtland report about sustainable development into something that can be measured. It wasn't an easy task because the concept of sustainable development is very intuitive, but then when you start talking about how to measure it in practice, what can support this concept, then things become much more complicated. And in fact, the challenge we have ahead of us over the next 18 months is to have the wording right, the goals and, of course, the targets right, and third, the indicators right. And this is not an easy task. Let me start quoting a recent sentence. We need a data revolution. Too often, development efforts have been hampered by a lack of the most basic data about the social and economic circumstances in which people live. Substantial improvements in statistical systems will be needed. This will require substantial investments in building capacity. And I always think that as when politicians say we have to look at low-hanging fruits, they think that statistics come from trees, so they can easily be taken from trees. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And the MDG process has clearly demonstrated that the lack of investments in statistics led to lack of comparability of data. And therefore, the whole policies were weakened by this element. So this time, we have to try to do something different. So my first plea to you is to avoid that statisticians are involved in this process only at a later stage. Of course, we don't want to talk about political choices. This is your tasks, are the tasks of the several groups that have been created within the UN, but please don't hope that at the last minute we are able to measure concepts that sound very nice, but they are very difficult to be measured. The good news is that within the Conference of European Statisticians, we started several years ago, as I said, in trying to achieve a framework on how to measure sustainable development. Measurement is not an easy matter, but statisticians are also not easy people. This is why we had to fight some time in order to get the conference paying attention to this issue. Myself, when I was at the OECD, and Lydia Bratanova, who is now the director of the statistics division of UNECE, fight it very hard in order to have the conference focus on these topics. The good news, as I said, is that after a few years of work, now we have a framework that should be adopted by the Conference of European Statisticians in June as a first step that could help in drawing the big picture that politicians, of course, will draw depending on the different priorities, but trying, at least we hope, to get a language that can then be used in order to measure these concepts. This is a very important achievement, but of course we have developed this framework. We have not set in stone the indicators, because this is exactly what the political process have to do once the goals and targets are defined. Let me also tell you a couple of examples of why we need the wording right. And I would take just one example, which is a little bit a nuclear bomb, but just to understand how this is important. I like very much the sustainability, the word of sustainability. But this concept opens the door to the comment made by Woody Allen, taking the very famous sentence by Groucho Marx: why should I care about future generations? What did they do for me? Beside the joke, the political point that this sentence makes is fundamental, because future generations don't vote. And this is why it's so difficult now to inject in our current policies the concept of sustainability in practice, not in theory. We economists, because I have two scenes, one is that I'm an economist and second that I'm working in statistics, so please forgive me for this. We economists are used to use the other concept, trying to actualize future, to discount future losses and gains. If you use this concept, you move towards the concept of vulnerability, because the future can become real. So I'm very fine now, but if I don't do the right things, my life will be exposed to very bad stuff in future. And this is about the current generation, the generation that votes. And the vulnerability is a key word after the series of crises we went through over the last 5 years, the food crisis, the energy crisis, environmental crisis in some countries, financial, economic, and social. Because we human beings, when we want to do something, we are very good in doing everything. And in this case, we went through different crises. So you see that addressing the issue of sustainability cannot be done without thinking about the concept of vulnerability, which is something that, as I said, after this crisis is very high in people's mind. The second point I would like to make, again, about language, is the relationship between sustainable development policies and the so-called corporate social responsibility policies that enterprises are doing. A lot of countries, and especially multinationals now, are developing these corporate social responsibility concepts and indicators. But if we don't match these two words, these two, I would say, vocabularies, we are not able to engage as we should the private sector into this game. This is why, for example, in Italy, but also in Netherlands, we are looking at the indicators that the Global Reporting Initiative and other global initiatives for companies have developed in order to match them with the sustainable development indicators that we statisticians are doing, in order to allow them to benchmark themselves with the overall performance of a sector. So you see that in this way we can link the macro dimension with the micro dimension, making, in my view, a very important step forward towards the engagement of all agents in this game. Just let me conclude these remarks with another good news. The UN Statistical Commission, which is a body of the DESA Secretariat in New York, has decided to establish a Friends of the Chair group in order to assist the Secretariat over the next 2 years in this process. So the good news is that not only statisticians have developed some concepts and languages that could be used by you in your negotiations and discussions, but we have already set up the working group that can help UN, UNDP and others in this effort. And a very important point from this perspective is also that other countries who started very far from these concepts, and I stop here, like Bhutan. Bhutan was very active in having the concept of happiness included in the language, and in fact the UN General Assembly passed a resolution on this. Well, through the work that we have done over the last few months by a working group established by Bhutan, now they understand that they have to converge with this concept of happiness towards, is in a sense, something that adds on the concept of equitable and sustainable well-being, which is the concept used by OECD and others in order to understand how progress of societies can be measured. I stop here just to telling you that all these different efforts are now trying to converge, and the community of international statisticians is very active in order to provide what we can provide to support your work over the next few years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure that any preconceptions people may have had about economists and statisticians have just evaporated, because that was very clear that measuring these concepts such as sustainable development and corporate social responsibility and even happiness are very difficult, but that you're there to support this. Thank you very much, Mr. Giovannini. I now turn to Mr. Zakharov, who's going to talk to us about the importance of strengthening the sustainable development movement, ensuring a broad representation from the state, business and civil society.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this interesting discussion. I would like to make a few statements. The first is an importance of broad movement to support sustainable development. I'm sure, looking at different countries, that we have so close connection and relation between the strength of the civil society and success in sustainable development. Look at different countries, and possibly you can easily agree with me. We really need such general movement. We need it globally, regionally, and nationally. And I think that all three sectors should be involved, as for sure I mean state, business and civil society. And again, we should put the main emphasis on the strengthening the civil society groups. Talking about both grassroots mass NGOs and expert groups like different institutions for sustainable development, just to identify the way, to be rather flexible in identifying the priorities. Then we should establish politically at all mentioned levels the priority of state and business support of such movement and such activity. I think this is the key issue for anything that we would like to implement for sustainable development. strengthen such broad movement to support sustainable development. Second, I call it awareness and incentives. Each second or third word in this whole could be sustainability. But if you will go on the street and ask ordinary people, not many of them really understand what does mean sustainability. How we could expect that they will realize these brilliant ideas if they do not aware what that and how important it is for them to implement it. It's awareness. And of course, incentives. We can send many slogans, but until the moment when people realize that they have some incentives, it's simply profitable for them to do something for sustainable development. Nothing happened again. And I would like to suggest for you to think not only about financial support, it's first of all needed for us, but also cultural things. I think that not only environment, but cultural heritage is very important to wake up people to originate their practical, personal, if you want, selfish interest to implement something for sustainability. Looking at our experience in Russia, for example, we have very good friends and colleagues in cultural field. People who work to protect not only natural heritage, but cultural heritage are our friends and colleagues, and they are very enthusiastic to do something sustainable. I think it's very important. If you look at situation, what people consider as crisis, it's not environmental or social situation. It's serious test for cultural and educational development. We know that highly developed countries already consider that we are in environmental crisis, but some others are still waiting. When we will get it, I think this is again and again very important. My second statement is awareness and incentives. The third is that we should be rather flexible and maybe not to expect that each country is ready now to introduce in their routine common policy the holistic sustainable development approach. At first, it's better to have sustainable development planning not as a separate program. It should be incorporated in general strategy and actual plans for social and economic development. Looking at our experience, we know that, first of all, people would like to live better, and they are worried in implementation of some economic and social ideas. And only after that, they start to think about environmental concern. I think that they should be all together. We should not try to introduce some sustainability as a separate program. Let them be inside, incorporated naturally, deeply into common strategic planning and actual planning. I think this is also very important, and I would like to support 100% idea coming from our colleagues, unfortunately he's not here at the moment, Mark Halle, that we should not be considering a holistic approach. Let us identify some particular windows for our new opportunities. If, for example, we can introduce some green economy and low-carbon society ideas through Olympic Games and sport events, why not to do it? If we can introduce something through social corporate responsibility of business, let's do it, because not in each country currently it's possible to introduce sustainable development as such as a holistic approach. This is the third statement. And the last one is requirements for adaptation. It's extremely important because in some countries, they are not only ready, they started the process 20 years ago after main event in 1992, but some still are not so active. Why? Because they simply do not understand what we are talking about. They cannot hear you. It's a serious process to adopt sustainable development ideas for different regions and different countries. I think this is crucial, and I would like to suggest it is three such possible ways for adaptation. For highly developed countries, they already realize some limits, and sustainable development partly is limitation for their growth. For developing countries, just new opportunities, because it's dangerous to explain that they have some limits. They have new opportunities. They can get as much support as they want, but only for green growth. I think it's very important. And the last statement is that we should develop something for countries with rich natural resources. It's absolutely crucial because looking at such countries like Russia and Brazil, they have responsibility and they should protect and take care of their natural resources, not only for themselves, but for the globe. But looking at the situation now, during our discussion, tropical forests still are shrinking. And we should not wait, we should create special mechanism how to protect it. And let me suggest to you to think seriously about such special adaptation, sustainable development ideas for countries with very rich natural resources. And when we finally start to think about institutional measures, how we can manage it, I think to implement all these ideas, we need some kind of forum. Forum at different levels, and my suggestion is to look at great opportunities to use such civil society initiative and activities like economic and social councils. We have it at national level, we have in Europe, we have globally, and through that organization, it has been already prepared the first report, Civil Society in Crisis. Why not to think about the second report, very close to our topic for discussion, sustainable development and civil society? I think it's very important, and we should delegate such a forum that we try to create to be responsible to combine efforts of different such organizations. I think we should keep in mind different opportunities such European Union, such as ex-USSR countries, Commonwealth of Independent States, countries with rich natural resources, BRICS countries, and so on. It doesn't matter, there could be some overlapping, but the most important is to create some opportunities, new opportunities for different kinds of countries. And let's say that for all these tasks, we need to create such a forum. And again, the main mission for this forum should be to create and to support such movement for sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zakharov, on the importance of this movement for sustainable development and, of course, for making this concept understandable to the people and so that there is definite buy-in for it. Thank you. I would like to move now to Mr. Dušek, who will talk about strengthening the role of UNEP with a greater delivery at regional and country level, and also deepening the UN Environment Programme's cooperation with the UNECE.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you to the UNECE to have invited me on the panel. And I promise I will not only speak about the United Nations Environment Programme, because this is a UNECE meeting, and I would like to, of course, give an update on important developments that have happened since Rio for UNEP, but also to show how it is relevant to the debates that we are having in this region and in this meeting. So to start with Rio, in paragraph 88 of the outcome document, The Future We Want, there is a number of significant changes for UNEP in terms of its strengthening and upgrading. This has been confirmed by the United Nations General Assembly in December last year, and we have held our first universal session of our governing body, the Governing Council, in February this year. And this has been now transformed into the United Nations Environment Assembly of UNEP by another General Assembly decision. It may seem as a game of abbreviations, but it is quite significant because for the first time after 40 years, there is a universal voice in the governance of UNEP, and all the countries are at an equal footing. And that strengthens the notion of UNEP being the global environment authority. The second element, which I would say is even more pertinent to our discussion today, is that UNEP has been requested to work more on the country level and to strengthen also its regional presence. And this goes into a number of areas. policy dialogue with the countries and with the regional counterparts, the delivery of our program of work in terms of implementation, and assistance in capacity building to the countries to improve their environmental sustainability. Of course, that gives us a mandate, and hopefully also as of next year the budget increase in terms of the United Nations regular budget and the voluntary contributions to work more with the regional coordination mechanisms such as the UNECE-driven ones in terms of other interagency work, but also within what we do in the country teams in the individual countries. We also had a very useful consultation at the regional level during our governing council with the Eastern European group countries, and that's something that we want to build on. And we are, of course, listening carefully to the debates here, what would be the lessons learned and the impacts for what UNEP should be doing with the enhanced mandate that I just described. Moving away from UNEP, what has changed in terms of the institutional setup for sustainable development at the global level, we will be seeing the high-level political forum, and the challenge for this forum will be to make clear that this is something significantly changed from the Commission for Sustainable Development, while building on some of the strengths that are mentioned in the background paper, and that also this high-level political forum, when it is established, also attracts the right interest and participation of the countries, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have in the sustainability agenda. Another process, the Sustainable Development Goals. I very much subscribe to what has been said before, that they need to be measurable. If we look at the green economy practice, for instance, we see that you can imagine many things under the green economy, but you are not able to measure whether it is sufficient or whether it is business as usual or whether it's the state of the art. It's a very divergent picture, and you need some kind of common denominator to be able to answer that question, which of course doesn't mean that there will be a uniform approach for every country. It is not possible. We have the set of global environmental goals which exist in the UNEP and the family of the multilateral environment agreements, and that's something that can indeed contribute to the setup of the SDGs. And what has been made clear during our governing council as well was the link between the sustainable consumption and production and sustainable development goals, that probably SCP and the 10-year framework program that has been launched in Rio and that UNEP is hosting should be maybe one of the sustainable development goals to be set up. Moving to the regional level, well, we have a significant interagency work ongoing, and we have prepared quite a successful report and informative report on the way to Rio. We are now discussing together, the agencies, what would be the messages between the Rio 2012 and the post-2015 process, and how we can capture the trends and the specifics of this region into what should be the messages that the countries can use in designing the post-2015 framework. Of course, the big question would be how to link the SDGs, which I mentioned, with the post-MDG debate, whether this should become one single set of measures. We would see a lot of rationale for it from the environment perspective, but also the other concerns of the countries in the region. We have the Environment for Europe process, which is going on, and there will be important discussions on its future happening, and it would be really interesting to see, on one hand, the high-level political forum, its regional let's say, subsidiary bodies, and the role of the Environment for Europe. Because what we probably don't want to create is yet another layer of structure where we would meet in the same setting with the same participants and audience, and we would not advance what we see that is not functioning in terms of achieving sustainable development. And of course, not to forget the national level of coordination and engagement of the particular authorities and stakeholders. If I look around this room, I see that I know probably the majority of the participants, which probably also means that it's still very much seen as sustainable development linked with the environment and to a lesser extent with the other areas that indeed need to be captured and need to be linked in order to make the sustainable development process more meaningful. I would end here and leave it for comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on the Sustainable Development Goals, the high-level political forum, which leads us very nicely now into taking your questions, your comments from the floor after these thought-provoking presentations we've had from our panellists. I would encourage you to ask questions. I do believe that we will have the time to respond to those. Before we go to that session, of course, it would help us with our timekeeping to know who would now like to take part in the interactive discussion. So again, if I can ask you to indicate with your name plate, and Monica has got far better eyesight than me and is taking down the names. We're just going to read out the names of the member states and major groups who have indicated that they would like to participate.
So far I have Ireland, I guess on behalf of European Union. I have Belarus, I have France, Russian Federation, Children and Youth, Austria, UNIDO, Italy, and I was told that, Romania, I see you now. Is there anybody, Kyrgyzstan, yes? Anybody else I've missed? Women's group? That's it?
That's 10.
That's 10?
It's enough.
Yeah, that's a good number, 10, yes, for the time we still have.
So we could say 5 minutes each.
Yes.
Well, some quick maths there. We have 10 participants. I will stop if there are questions that are going to be directed at the panellists. At the end, I will ask the panellists for their views on what they've heard from the floor. And I'm delighted to be able to tell you that we'll be able to give you 5 minutes each. We'll be using the traffic light system, but you have up to 5 minutes to make your comments. I would therefore first like to give the floor to the EU presidency.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, distinguished delegates. I'd also like to thank the panellists here today for their many interesting and insightful contributions. The EU and its member states are fully engaged to play an active role in the process of establishing a high-level political forum. It is important to ensure that the HLPF, as it has come to be known, is in a position to discharge the core functions set out in the future we want, while avoiding duplication or overlap with other existing mandates and structures in a cost-effective manner. Specific preparatory activities for the HLPF need to avoid the creation of heavy bureaucratic processes that allow for little constructive interaction and debate. We recognise the important role that CSD has played within the EU system, within the UN system, notably in addressing the 3 dimensions of sustainable development in an integrated manner. However, we need to guard against replicating some of the shortcomings of the CSD experience and to make sure that we learn from those experiences. We need to ensure that the highest level political guidance and a balanced integration of all 3 dimensions of sustainable development in an effective manner is achieved by the HLPF, and that it should serve as a dynamic platform for sustainable development, including the post-2015 agenda within the UN system, directly linked with ECOSOC and working at a higher political level at regular intervals through UNGA. Moreover, it is important to ensure in this respect that the strengthened UNEP and the new HLPF work in a complementary manner, and that UNEP feeds environmental issues into the HLPF discussions so that all 3 aspects of sustainable development can be dealt with by the HLPF in a balanced way. Additionally, the inclusive participatory model of CSD could be the starting point for the HLPF. Apart from CSD, other models of civil society participation and consultation should also be explored. The regional implementation meetings of the CSD provided a platform by which sustainable development viewpoints and best practice experiences were exchanged at all levels. We should make use of the lessons learned from these meetings when addressing the regional preparatory aspects of the HLPF. The format and frequency of such discussions will need to be determined within the context of the ongoing UNGA negotiations on HLPF modalities. Human resource requirements for such meetings, as highlighted in the Secretariat note, as well as budgetary constraints, are additional considerations. The ECE could continue to facilitate discussions on issues that are specific to the region with a view to inputting the work of the Forum for its consideration. The role of the ECE in supporting implementation of policy decisions should also be considered. Work still needs to be done on the exact modalities and how to achieve the link to ECOSOC. A favourable option would be for the HLPF to meet at ministerial level as a special session of ECOSOC and at regular intervals at UNGA level. A strong link of the HLPF with ECOSOC would contribute to a high degree of consistency and convergence in sustainable development discussions, including on the post-2015 agenda, and ensure an integrated approach addressing all 3 dimensions of sustainable development. Furthermore, the EU welcomes the establishment of the different working groups and panels on the post-2015 agenda and looks forward to contributing to the process. In this context, the EU believes that the OWG and SDGs and the process to consider the post-2015 should converge into one single framework, and I would echo the comments made by Jan Dusik on that respect. The proposals for SDGs should reflect the 3 overarching objectives and essential requirements for sustainable development, take into account different national circumstances, policies, priorities, capacities and levels of development, be global in nature and universally applicable to all countries. The proposals should also be limited in number, action-oriented, easy to communicate and linked to concrete targets and indicators. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments on the high-level political forum and on the Sustainable Development Goals. I now give the floor to Belarus.
Thank you very much, Chair, for this opportunity. And many thanks for the 5-minute allocation to our delegation. This we see as meaning that Panel B is slightly more important in this context, since Panel A only had 3 minutes per speaker. And also many thanks to the panelists who addressed some very topical and interesting comments to us. In particular, we would like to take up the ideas we heard from Mr. Giovannini to the effect that the Sustainable Development Goals should be easily measurable in statistical terms, something we absolutely support. Few comments now from our delegation. We are quite convinced that regardless of the discussions to be held in New York on the Universal high-level political forum as the successor to the CSD. Despite that, the regional commissions should continue playing a principal role in sustainable development. We believe that the regional commissions are those best familiar with the situation in their own regions, and they have the most clear picture of the needs and potential of countries. They need to be a conduit for ideas, signals, and impetus to be generated by the General Assembly in New York. These signals and impulses coming through the regional commissions to countries in the form of specific projects and other forms of interaction, and this would include our commission, shouldn't be weakened in the field. In fact, they should be stronger and be more focused, taking account of because of the greater understanding of the commissions, of their regional issues, and the ways to resolve them. As we know, as we develop the Rio +20 decisions, we've had a group to look on the Sustainable Development Goals, consisting of 30 participants, and it's our privilege to work there with our partners from Serbia. Working on sustainable development will follow various tracks, but the driving force, we think, will be work within the group in New York. Nevertheless, we are convinced that in our own region, promoting the implementation of the SDGs is only going to be effective if we work through the ECE. With all due respect to New York, they're quite far removed from European issues, and Geneva is a lot closer to them. The ECE has significant experience, which makes it possible to add high added value in working on sustainable development, not just regionally, but globally as well. A few examples to show what I mean. The existing of a sustainable economic system isn't possible without energy sustainability. And we think the Committee on Sustainable Energies activities are very important here. We've been traditionally very active in the work of the committee, particularly on the initiative on energy efficiency, effectiveness, which has started getting global now. We're talking, in fact, about the initiative for Global Energy Efficiency 21. We would like this experience to be taken into account when we're talking about implementing the ideas of Rio +20. Apart from that, the ECE has significant potential for assisting countries in building up a competitive economy based on up-to-date technology. The cycle of reviews of innovative policy of states have already shown what they can do. And in fact, the document for Belarus, which involved leading specialists, became the basis for our national innovative development policy. A similar good example could be given in the field of housing economy, which again we see as an inalienable part of sustainable development. And this, to a great extent, helps countries to develop and improve their national policy. And the work going on actively in the ECE on sustainable housing and mandatory principles can be one of the examples of best practice in the global process to achieve sustainable development. Finally, Chair, I must say that I've just quoted examples from a few fields. I think that a full listing of all the components where the UNECE could or is already making a contribution to our Rio +20 would take much more time than the 5 minutes allocated. Just to sum up, I would like to see in the outcome document that our position on the broad involvement of the regional commissions, particularly the ECE, in work on sustainable development be included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for making so clear the role of the UNECE. I now give the floor to France.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to one and all. First of all, I'd like to thank the panelists for their very interesting presentations. Might I also say that France fully endorses what was said by Ireland on behalf of the European Union and its member states. France remains convinced that the UNECE can and must play a driving role in implementing the Rio commitments. One example, the role of civil society. Today, we still see that, yet again, they're active in our debate. And here I'd like to commend work done within the context of the Aarhus Convention, which has done so much to implement Article 10 of the Rio Declaration. progress has been achieved. Other progress is still needed. In particular, I'm thinking of the governing body of the UN, UNEP, or the role of public participation in civil society was enhanced. I'm also thinking of negotiations to be held in New York as we set up the high-level forum, which the Irish presidency just referred to. I'm also thinking of work done by the Latin American United Nations Committee, which has contacted the Aarhus Convention Committee to see how to implement the principles of that convention at the Latin American regional level. All of these fora, all of these initiatives inspired by work done in this region, in this forum, in this body. And finally, might I inform you of two processes which the French government has just initiated. The first relates to development with the implementation of our national development and international solidarity assizes, which is charged with thinking about the post-2015 agenda. And secondly, the environmental conference, which is going to set itself the aim of having an annual discussion on issues such as energy transition, environmental taxes, eco-taxes, and the use of waste in order to promote a circular recycling economy. These two processes share at least one feature. They involve civil society, parliamentarians, NGOs, unions, researchers, and also, this is vital, local communities, local governing bodies, self-governing bodies, which for we in the French government are felt to be very important means, major stakeholders and players in the implementation of the policies we wish to implement in our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I now give the floor to Romania.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Distinguished participants, we fully support with the position of the EU presented by the Irish presidency. Considering the active role played in the last 3 years, Romania would like to reiterate its willingness to get involved in the processes initiated following the outcome of the Rio+20 conference. The concept of sustainable development must be considered at a regional level based on the decisions taken at global level, while taking into account national circumstances. Romania supports the implementation of the provision of the Rio+20 outcome document, The Future We Want, including those regarding the institutional framework for sustainable development. In this context, Romania considers that the high-level political forum that will replace the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development should take into consideration the lesson learned from this commission while remaining adapted to the current international relations. Regarding the establishment at the regional level of the HLPF and the frequency of its meeting, we consider that, as mentioned in the Rio+20 document, the HLPF should be created as a body at the global level. The process will have to avoid overlapping or duplication with other existing mandates and structures in a cost-effective manner. However, we could have intergovernmental meetings at the regional level to prepare the meetings of the HLPF that could generate positions, contributions, the voice of the region to preparation of global high-level deliberations on sustainable development. That can be built based on the experience of the preparatory intergovernmental meetings of SCDE sessions. They could be organized in order to prepare the ORSC of HLPF. Moreover, this preparation will have to be correlated with the intersession activities and session of the UN Environmental Assembly of UNEP. In order to efficiently address the challenges of eradicating poverty and sustainable development that represent a major problem at the global level, the revision of MDGs and the activity of elaborating SDGs should be done together. In this way, we consider that a single general framework can be built with common challenges in priority objectives, so that by 2030 we can ensure a decent life for all and a sustainable future for the planet. As the bodies that will monitor the implementation of the provisions of the Rio+20 conference outcome and the international processes initiated by it, the HLPF could also play a central role in monitoring the implementation of SDGs as well as the other processes such as the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. In this regard, the UNECE states should contribute to the finalization of these processes through their contribution during the working groups established in the UN system for their implementation. Romania will actively participate to this end, together with the other states, in the small board of the implementation of the 10 IFP. Romania will propose and support SDG based on national circumstances and in beneficial connection with the implementation of the globally established SDGs. A national level consultation process has already been initiated, correlated with the post-2015 development agenda. In order to implement the outcome of the Rio+20 conference, Romania considers it important to raise awareness and sustainable consumption and production at the national level of all actors, producers, consumers, the scientific and cultural communities by addressing the specific aspects within dedicated structures. For example, regarding the integration of the environmental protection policy in other sectorial policies and strategies, Romania uses an interministerial committee chaired by the Minister of the Environment that brings together the other ministries and public authorities and the relevant stakeholders. The committee periodically examines and proposes necessary measures in order to ensure environmental protection and implicitly sustainable development in Romania. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on how the voice of the region could be heard at the high-level political forum and your view on how the high-level political forum could monitor the Sustainable Development Goals. I would now like to move to the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, moderator. We are most grateful to the panelists for their interesting, frank and very acute comments. We would agree with some of what they said, not everything, but nevertheless we welcome the discussion, and we don't think that we should prejudge any negotiating processes taking place in New York. So let me just make the following three comments. First of all, the Russian Federation supports the work of the open-ended working group on the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the recommendation that which will become crucial for the formation of the UN Development Agenda following 2015. We see the SDGs as a whole set of the most important quantifiable, analyzable, and monitorable elements in the broader development agenda. And in this agenda, we need to incorporate the MDGs as well as the most up-to-date aims and goals agreed upon in recent international fora. The SDGs should repeat the successes of the MDGs, thus they need to be limited in number, understandable, and a well-packaged media product, as are the MDGs. The SDGs are first and foremost guideline for international and national development efforts, which need to allow countries themselves to formulate specific tasks and indicators, taking account of global priorities. You need to take due account of the SDGs in the regional and national conditions and particularities, which can't be done without countries developing their own set of goals and relevant indicators. Now, the tasks and the goals, the targets, need to take account of the three components of sustainable development: economic development, social issues, and environmental protection. At the same time, we would oppose any expansion of the concept of sustainable development to any so-called fourth dimension, which includes political issues of peace and security. Secondly, institutional issues. Negotiations to determine the parameters and operations of the political forum at high level on sustainable development are vital. They are being conducted in New York, and they should be concluded this May. The forum will play an important role in monitoring and drawing the provisional conclusions on the SDGs, and it's going to be important to make sure that it doesn't turn into an international supervisory mechanism or any way of imposing additional obligations on countries. We think that the optimum proposal is the hybrid model, which provides for the forum to operate something like ECOSOC under the UNGA. We see no objection to periodically holding the forum at a level of heads of government and state, tied in with the overall high-level political discussion in the GA. And a leading role in implementation of the SDGs should be played by ECOSOC, which is the fundamental institutional body coordinating UN work in the field of sustainable development. We don't think it appropriate to create any new bureaucratic structures which have no visible added value in comparison with existing mechanisms recognized to be effective. Third, the regional input to the development of the work of the high-level political forum. We agree that they haven't always been taken due into account. We don't intend to accuse any regional platforms of this or mechanisms. It's not their fault. It's rather the fault of the member countries. It's very simple. When you sit at the negotiating table in New York, representatives of governments should think the same things as their colleagues who sit in Geneva, Bangkok, Addis Ababa, or any other regional platform, and that's the question for governments. Nevertheless, we're ready to discuss the way in which we can improve the architecture and structure for regional cooperation. We've noted the idea contained in the Secretariat note on the creation of a regional high-level political forum. I think we need to discuss this in a focused way once we've worked to determine the modalities of the global forum. But nevertheless, whatever the results of the discussions at the regional level might be, we believe that the establishment of any new mechanism should strengthen the role of the ECE. I see the red light. I'd just like to say that we're ready to sign up to what was said by our Belarus colleague, who was so convincing in putting the case for the ECE. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your good timekeeping and your clear thoughts on the development of the Sustainable Development Goals and the high-level political forum. I now give the floor to the major group, Children and Youth.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, panellists and delegates. My name is Alice Vincent from an organisation called the World Future Council, but I'm speaking also on behalf of the major group for children and youth. I would like to make some brief comments on sustainable development governance from this perspective. We believe, agreeing with the esteemed panellist from Montenegro, that it's extremely valuable in negotiations on the high-level political forum that lessons learnt from the CSD are taken fully into account. In the first 5 years, the CSD played an important role in keeping sustainable development high on the international agenda, thus clearly showing the need for a high-level body on this topic. The CSD was innovative and engaging, particularly with major groups, so let us not let these achievements slip when redesigning the institutional framework for sustainable development. The challenges ahead of us are of a different scale and dimension to when the CSD was first established. The Forum has a bigger task ahead of it, and as a consequence, must be more effective than the CSD. New, innovative ideas and approaches will be required to create an effective political space where stronger, informed decisions are made for the long term. The Forum cannot be another talking shop. The Forum should be a central hub in the UN architecture, with high-level leadership to facilitate the agenda, bringing analysis and engaging with other institutions and external expertise, as well as looking to new and emerging challenges. The regional commissions should interact closely to provide a strong role in feeding back on implementation and help identify gaps. We want to highlight the need for regional approaches and strengthened regional stakeholder participation. Regional and national consultation meetings are still needed for increasing ownership of these processes. We also want to raise one of the major Group for Children and Youth's specific demands, one which was supported by numerous member states throughout the Rio+20 process who are present in this room today. It is the proposal for a special representative for future generations. This proposal was in the negotiating text until the final hours at Rio. Instead, the future we want now contains a call for the UN Secretary-General to submit a report to the GA on intergenerational solidarity and future generations. We at MGCY and numerous civil society organisations are working to ensure this report results in strong action-oriented outcomes. We look to the ongoing support of Member States, particularly in the European Union, who were so instrumental in establishing and retaining the proposal in the negotiating text in the first place. Mr. Mark Haller from IISD spoke earlier today about equity being at the core of negotiation stalemates. This is no different to intergenerational equity and the need to bring concern for future generations into current decision-making processes. The questions raised in the note by the Secretariat for this panel discussion focus on how the ECE can be better heard in the UN in negotiations and discussions on the global level. Working with the Forum, having a representative for future generations could actually help enhance international cooperation and coordination, including liaising with existing international institutions, including the regional commissions. It would help identify and develop proposals for new initiatives for the protection of future generations. It could also facilitate effective participation of major groups and other relevant stakeholders and increase and facilitate capacity for institutional innovation at national and subnational levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on the high-level political forum. I now give the floor to Austria.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Allow me first of all to underline that Austria fully aligns itself, of course, with the statement delivered by the European Union. I would also like to thank the panelists for their most insightful interventions and the valuable ideas contained therein. Let me first of all emphasize that Austria attaches great importance to the post-2015 development agenda and the new institutional setup for which Rio+20 has laid the foundations. We have therefore shown a high degree of engagement in those areas, both within the European Union and the United Nations. We fully support the approach by the European Union to work at a single and comprehensive set of goals consisting of the successor instrument of the MDGs and the SDGs. When it comes to the institutional setup, we strongly believe that ECOSOC, which is presently undergoing a major reform process, should play an important role. We attach particular importance to a strong involvement of all stakeholders. The inclusive participatory model of the CSD should be the starting point, while other modes of civil society participation, such as the Development Cooperation Forum, should also be explored. Such participation is crucial for the success of the future set of goals. Linked to the reform process of ECOSOC, is the question of the high-level political forum that will inter alia replace the Commission on Sustainable Development. In line with the common EU position, Austria strongly advocates for the HLPF to be a special function of ECOSOC, preferably as part of the high-level segment, with links to the General Assembly of the United Nations. Since the HLPF will play an important part in the elaboration and subsequent implementation of the post-2015 development agenda, we believe that the participation of a variety of stakeholders, such as civil society, United Nations funds and programs, and the private sector, is crucial. Allow me at this stage to point out that the Austrian State Secretary for Foreign Affairs has started an inclusive consultative process with the Austrian civil society on the post-2015 agenda, which is currently ongoing. The HLPF should deal with the important issues of our times, but at the same time avoid duplications with ongoing debates in ECOSOC and other intergovernmental fora. In order to enable participation on the highest political level, the question of the right timing of its meetings will be crucial. While not losing efficiency out of sight, Austria would favor strong outcome documents for future HLPF meetings. Creating new structures, however, should not result in a duplication of present arrangements, but rather go hand in hand with making optimal use of what already exists and what has served us well in the past. In other words, a multiplication of meetings, including possible regional preparatory meetings, should be avoided. Allow me to conclude my remarks by underlining once more that my country attaches utmost importance to the post-2015 development agenda and the Rio+20 follow-up. We will therefore make the best use of our membership in ECOSOC in 2013 and 2014 in order to move those issues forward and to find solutions for the pressing needs of our times. And I think I caught up the time I lost before. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Excellent timekeeping, and thank you very much for sharing your view on the high-level political forum and your remarks about the importance of a participatory approach. I would now like to give the floor to UNIDO.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and I'd also like to thank the panellists of both of today's panels for the very interesting and relevant discussions on the follow-up to Rio+20 and the moves towards a post-2015 framework based on the three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. The emerging development agenda provides a unique opportunity to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation by increasing resource efficiency in production processes and by offering new opportunities in green industry and the green economy generally. UNIDO is active throughout the ECE region in developing partnerships for sustainable industrial development and has enjoyed a close cooperation with the ECE, including through the Secretary General's initiative on Sustainable Energy for All, which is led by the UNIDO Director General. Many of the challenges facing sustainable industrial development in countries of the ECE region also find an echo in other parts of the world. And in considering regional implications of the next development agenda, as well as its institutional underpinning, it is also worthwhile looking at commonalities among and between country typologies across regions. A number of ECE countries are classed as middle income. While middle income countries are far from homogeneous, there is a case for examining how common concerns can be addressed in the SDG and post-2015 context. Given that 70% of the world's poor reside in middle-income countries, strategies to overcome these challenges will be important in the next set of development goals. It is therefore my pleasure to inform participants here that the government of Costa Rica will hold a high-level conference in San Jose, Costa Rica from the 12th to 14th of June of this year, entitled Challenges for Sustainable Development and International Cooperation in Middle-Income Countries. The conference, which will be facilitated by UNIDO, will particularly address the needs of middle-income countries in areas of environmental sustainability and green industry, inclusive growth and prosperity, and financing for sustainable development in the emerging post-2015 context. Participation of countries in the ECE region will be vital for the success of this high-level conference. To this end, a special event to share information and discuss the aims of the conference will be held by the Permanent Mission of Costa Rica in Geneva on 7th of May next. Further information on this information-sharing event will shortly be made available to Member States and to Geneva-based agencies by the Permanent Mission of Costa Rica. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that information sharing. I now give the floor to Italy.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Italy fully supports what has been expressed by Ireland as EU presidency on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Italy is directly involved in the high-level political forum definition process through the designation of our permanent representative to the United Nations as co-facilitator of the process. And I would like to take this opportunity to express some views, thanking at the same time the ECE Secretariat for having prepared the smart and useful questions as base for this discussion, and the eminent panelists for excellent presentations. The reform process of the Sustainable Development Governance Architecture is a complex and wide issue which needs a multi-level, interdisciplinary and integrated approach. Nevertheless, we believe that the Rio +20 outcome gives us a clear mandate in order to assure both a strengthening political guidance and a balanced integration of all three dimensions of sustainable development in a productive and effective manner. To this extent, there is an urgent need to define a dynamic platform capable of attracting the highest level of political participation and of addressing in a balanced way the social, environmental and economic dimensions of sustainable development. And the discussion in the high-level political forum intergovernmental meetings in New York are going in this very direction. The two co-chairs, the two co-facilitators, together with the Secretariat, are working towards the definition of a draft resolution to be submitted to the General Assembly later in weeks in this very direction. We expect the high-level political forum to become a stronger and more effective political instrument for sustainable development global policies, and to this aim, a stronger regional coordination mechanism is needed. In fact, the weakening of the Commission for Sustainable Development in its decision-making and review capacity has negatively impacted also on the work at the regional level. And I would like also to highlight that the UNECE region gathers together various countries and political groups that in New York sometimes stand on different negotiating positions. And the UNECE regional meetings, therefore, could provide for a unique opportunity to discuss at an early stage critical issues and divergent views building on a common regional ground and perspective. As for the Sustainable Development Goals, we are actively engaged in the open working group recently established in New York as part of a team composed by Italy, Spain and Turkey, and we are looking forward to finally enter into the discussion in the next week on post-2015 development agenda. The link between Sustainable Development Goals and the high-level political forum should be further explored also, in particular with regard to the SDGs review and follow-up process, given that the high-level political forum should become the main UN body focused on sustainable development. And with regards to the possible regional contribution to the definition of SDGs, the UNECE, as a part of the UN system task team on the post-2015 UN development agenda, could have a more active role in developing inputs also to the work on SDGs. In line with previous experiences, for example, with Rio+20 preparation, and following the future indications from New York, the UNECE could envisage some mechanism to prepare a regional contribution to the Open Working Group on SDGs. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much for your insights into the high-level political forum, the need for a strong coordination, a regional coordination, and of course the regional contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you very much. I want to join other delegations to follow up on the follow-up to Rio and post-MDG development discourse from a perspective of Kyrgyzstan. In the context of Rio Agenda, I shall reiterate our firm commitment to principles of sustainable development. I am also pleased to note that our country is among those 100 privileged countries that are where national consultations take place, a substantive contribution to the global post-2015 agenda. Today, a number of challenges ranging from poverty to energy sufficiency limit our progress on sustainable development path. These and other socio-economic challenges are being presently addressed by the Kyrgyz government in the framework of the Mid-Term National Strategy on Sustainable Development. In this context, it deserves mentioning that our efforts in some of development areas are aided by the EC program's activities. Now, let me elaborate shortly on two key challenges that we work to overcome in partnership with the UN. Our sustainable development and poverty eradication measures remain deterred by low rates of economic growth. Unfortunately, one of the causes for such economic performance is our landlockedness. Despite international efforts to help alleviate special needs of the landlocked developing states through the so-called Almaty Program of Action, Kyrgyzstan has tried to fulfill all its obligations, including provision on freedom of transit, facilitation of trade, simplified border crossing. It is our conviction that Kyrgyzstan and other LLDCs in Central Asia will be eventually better off if they implement comprehensively provisions of the Almaty program vis-à-vis each other. In 2014, we LLDCs will meet at the 10-year review conference to assess both accomplishments and failures, as well as decide on the future actions. In this connection, I call on the EC to work more closely with the UN High Representative for LDCs, LLDCs, and small island developing states to assist EC landlocked countries in area of transport, transit, trade facilitation, and border crossing. In addition to being landlocked, Kyrgyzstan is also a mountainous state with low income and relatively high indebtedness. In the UN classification, we are recognized as a country with special needs. At Rio conference, our delegation has put forward a proposal on launch of the so-called Mountainous Initiative that would mobilize support for mountainous developing states with low income and burdensome indebtedness. Under the proposed arrangement, it is assumed that creditors, countries, and international finance institutions provide debt relief in exchange for investments into sustainable green growth and development. That could have become a win-win outcome for all stakeholders. For example, we are observing rapid shrinking of our glaciers due to the global climate change. If such conversions are granted and financial resources are released, we would have been able to reduce our share in greenhouse gas emission by investing those funds in eco-friendly mountainous small and medium hydropower plants. thus reducing our reliance on coal and electricity generation. So I appeal to fellow EC member countries that are creditors to Kyrgyzstan to consider such conversions. On other related note, I shall say that I see a wider scope for involvement of transnational corporations in promoting principles of post-2015 development goals worldwide beyond standard social corporate responsibility practice. For example, corporations could work in low-income mountainous countries where they do not have business operations. It is proposed that the interested international companies partner with and help the governments to achieve one or two development goals, be it environment sustainability or child mortality reduction or other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kyrgyzstan, and your call for UNECE contributions to landlocked, mountainous and low-income countries like Kyrgyzstan. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now I give the floor to the women's group.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Women's Major Group and the NGO Major Group. I hope I get double time. No, I'm kidding. On the government's framework, we very much see the need for one framework for Sustainable Development Goals and post-2015. But we would call for the principle of no regression to be applied and to build it on the Rio principles, the Millennium Declaration, the Human Rights Conventions, UNECE Convention, etc. And we really need a shared vision on sustainable development. Planetary boundaries, circular economies, human rights-based, gender equality-based, social equity, and redistribution of wealth should be key. Building on what we have, we see that there needs to be different parts of the UN family, UNECE, UNEP, but also WHO, FAO. And so we wonder, and this is a question, if it makes sense to have maybe partly a shared secretariat or so. But also integration with European Union processes seems important. And we have some good practices. We know, for example, from the national water policy dialogues, which were a cooperation between the EU and the UNECE and some countries in the ECA region, that worked well. We also see some good regional cooperation with EEA and the European Chemicals Agency. So there is a lot I think we believe we can build on. But we also clearly need to address what we haven't done so far, the drivers of unsustainable development, which are inherent to our current trade and finance sectors. We need to have mechanisms for this. And for example, we need to move away from the concept of freedom of investment models towards investment for sustainable development models. So how do we bring that into the framework for SDGs, for the region? Accountability is key. We need the targets, the timetables, and the review mechanisms, many of which we have already. And of course, the means of implementation. And this should be at regional, national, and local levels through many of them exist already, national and local sustainable development strategic plans. And that we can integrate, of course, things which are already ongoing, like NAMAs. On the indicators, we hope that there can be a lot of work done on going beyond the GDP, on new indicators for equity and well-being. And of course, this might mean that we need to measure things which we are not yet measuring. We need to have the political will for that. The financing is key and has to come from national budgets, ODA, but also alternative mechanisms like the financial transaction tax, polluter pay taxes, including on extractive industries, chemicals of pesticide industry, and elimination of subsidies on unsustainable economic activities, so as subsidies for large-scale fishing fleets or the industrial agriculture. I'm almost finished. Technology is vital. We need independent technology assessment and monitoring. We know that we want green technologies, but too often green technologies are not that green, and we've had some negative experiences with risky technologies, which in the end cost a lot of money for the public and the taxpayer. Geoengineering is one example, where we have to be very careful. And last but not least, transparency and participation is, of course, very important, speaking from the civil society. And we would really call to address the asymmetries of power and to give political space to those who are least heard. So we support the intervention of the Children's and Youth Major Group. We need to have space for those representing groups most impacted by unsustainable development, the future generations, but also the new and upcoming small and medium-sized sustainable entrepreneurs. These need to be at the table. So the major group approach for public participation is a good way to organize it and can be further improved and strengthened. And I'm stopping here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much too. And we now have come to the end of our list that was given to us of member states and major groups who would like to intervene. So unless I see that anybody is waving at us and would like to take the floor, I'm going to shift the focus back to our panellists who've been listening intently to your views, your insights, your expectations into this high-level political forum and the Sustainable Development Goal processes. And I'm going to ask them to reflect on what you have said before we wrap up the segment. And so perhaps I should begin with Mr. Giovannini.
Thank you very much. I took note of several comments, although, of course, most of the comments were about the political process, but raised on my mind a few points that I would like to clarify that could be useful for your future work. First of all, you mentioned, of course, the role of regional commissions, and I will refer to the statistical role of UNECE, of course. I'm very glad to say that one of the proposals for the future work of the Statistics Division is exactly in the direction of sustainable development. I'm very pleased to see that one of the proposals in the context of the review of the 2005 reform of ECE clearly gives a mandate to the Statistics Division to work on sustainable development. And I would like to mention the fact that historically the Conference of European Statisticians that I'm chairing now and the work of the UNECE has been really global. Most of the initiatives taken by this region then became world standards once taken to the UN Statistical Commission. So it's very important that also for sustainable development, this is the style of our work. The second remark I would like to make, again, looking at the global and the regional perspectives, is that measuring sustainable development is much more complicated than measuring MDGs. And I would like to make this statement very clear. Because while MDGs are about the current conditions of people, talking about sustainability needs to look into the future, which means looking at the measurement of capital, the different forms of capital like natural capital, human capital, and so on. And this is much more complicated than just measuring the outcomes for the current generation. So this kind of development of indicators cannot be developed overnight. And it's very important that this region, together with the other regional commissions and other international organizations, undertakes as soon as possible more work on this area. But also countries should understand that once the goals will be fixed, once the indicators will be defined, it will take time to develop the indicators in practice. Therefore, it's important to be forward-looking and invest immediately on what, for example, the UNECE has already developed. Another important remark I would like, at least from my point of view, to make is that looking at the intergenerational dimension requires more data, but also looking at intra-generational dimension, which is about equity, requires much more data, because you cannot just rely on averages. You have to look at data for different population groups, which means collect many more data than just collecting data for national averages. And again, this has been clearly stated by the quote that I mentioned at the beginning of my speech. But again, this requires investments in statistics. The last remark I would like to make is that, to be very frank, will be very complicated, in my view, to combine the regional dimensions with the global dimensions once the indicators will be developed. Let me give you an example. Nutrition. Of course, nutrition is very important. But what is the problem of nutrition in this part of the world can be different from what nutrition problem is in Africa. For example, I take just one example of obesity, which of course is relevant in some countries, less relevant in others. Or once we decide that water is especially important, which is of course the case, then measuring the availability of water and the quality of water is very different if we do it, again, in Africa or in North America, because these are global sustainable development indicators. So one of the very complicated issues that you will be facing, not now, you have already a lot of complicated issues to discuss, but once you will move to indicators, is whether the entire world has to use the same indicators or whether there will be some flexibility in different regions, which is, of course, a very complicated issue because you want to give both the sense of the overall world movement, but also take into account the regional differences. It's just to say, and I stop here, that there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed as soon as the global goals will be established before discussing about indicators and targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the statistician's view on sustainable development goals. I would now like to ask Mr. Kaludjerović to give his thoughts on what he's heard on the high-level political forum, the Sustainable Development Goals. Please, a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have listened carefully all the participants in this deliberation from member states and major groups, and I heard quite a lot of interesting remarks, comments, and ideas. To be brief, I would just mention some of them that I would subscribe to. First, when it comes to high-level political forum, I would agree that we have to use experience that we have had. We have to avoid duplication. We have to avoid heavy bureaucracy. We have to make it as efficient as possible. We have to put or enrich, as Mr. Anand this morning said, empower our narration and to be more focused and future-oriented. I agree with the idea recently developed in New York, and I think that the things are developing in the right direction. And if I compare the limited time that we have before September with the time consumed before we established Peace Building Commission or before we established Human Rights Council, I think that there is a kind of efficiency in deliberations in New York heading towards an idea that is gaining more importance, I would say, so that the high-level political forum should be linked to ECOSOC and United Nations General Assembly. ECOSOC providing relevance and coherence in three parts of sustainable development, and the United Nations General Assembly providing universality with the participation of the highest possible level participation. The question whether it should be a yearly meeting on ECOSOC or every 4 years in the General Assembly needs to be defined, but my understanding is that we are heading towards the right direction. The second comment that I would make, and I'm very, very thankful for our colleague Giovannini with his own statement, and in particular with the explanation now about the mechanisms for regular monitoring. You have already done a great part of your job, as I understood, regardless of the fact that two major points are not yet defined, and that is Sustainable Development Goals and the indicators, but given the experience that you have and the discussion that will even today contribute to that, I hope that we will have that in place as soon as possible. And the third point that I consider very much important, and it was mentioned by some of the participants, I remember Mr. Zakharov and the French representative, and that is that we need to put more emphasis on the sustainable development and civil society. And we really need to strengthen the role of civil society. Sustainable development concept is quite new, I would say, for not just ordinary people, and we would need to strengthen that relationship in the months or years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure your focus on strengthening civil society will be one that Mr. Zakharov will share, and I would like to ask you for a few final thoughts.
I would like just to mention a couple of important things that we should not forget, creating new kind of activity, new forum, and new goals. The first, Sustainable Development Goals, it should be measurable, that's for sure, and we should accept White's idea of statisticians that we can dream about measuring anything, but can we really do it? I don't know how they will measure happiness. It depends on their progress in that respect, but definitely we should make a chance to measure public awareness. We know, looking at brief social surveys, that just in a few countries, people can mention environmental sustainable development concern among 10 first priorities. We should always keep in mind, and it should be among our goals. We should keep it in mind. In other case, we can just dream about some achievements. This is the first statement. And the second, of course, is about regions. I can hear mentioning about a regional experience in each talk, and I think we should make this remark. You remember it was an excellent presentation about achievements that we can get at local community levels, at city levels, and let us spread it wider for not only a regional, national, but even inside the particular country, some local community initiatives. I think it's very important. We should not only adopt for them sustainable development goals, but also to delegate high-level political forum to identify positive achievements of regions and spread them. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And to conclude from our panellists, I'd like to ask Mr. Dusic to say a few words.
Thank you very much. It was indeed interesting to listen to all the comments. I made a lot of notes, and I would limit my comments to 4 brief ones because the time is running up. Well, first of all, I think that what is a common denominator, what I take from this discussion, is that there is a lot of interest in this region to make sure that the priorities of the region are well reflected in the global processes. And we have to find a mechanism for the institutional setup for the post-Rio and following that the post-2015 process, how to ensure that these voices are correctly reflected and heard, and the nuances of having on one hand the European Union, on the other hand the mountainous landlocked countries like Kyrgyzstan, all reflected in the global debates. And there I see the role of the Economic Commission for Europe is really irreplaceable as the building block of that process. And of course, coming back to my earlier comment about the coherence of the national positions, whatever is being said in this room in Geneva should be compatible with what is said in the rooms in New York and what is also said in the rooms in Nairobi when we have, for instance, our UNIA sessions. So that's a homework for all the countries. So that's comment number one. Comment number two. There was, I very much like the contribution from children and youth on the intergenerational equity, because this is something where I think is another feature of our regional discussions when we are discussing among the agencies, let's say the common denominator, it's the equality and intergenerational equity that resounds a lot, and I think that we are ready to build on it, the messages from this region together. The third point is that one of the, I'm coming back to UNEP, one of the tasks that we have, or that our executive director has, is the head of the Environment Management Group, which is a group of the UN aiming to mainstream environment sustainability. And from the latest session of our governing council, there has been a clear call for UN-wide system to work on the system-wide strategies, the role for the head of UNEP, but also calling on the Secretary General of the UN to promote system-wide strategies within the EMG context. And a final point, one other element where UNEP hopefully will be able to be active more in the future in the region is the mandate to assist the regional fora in the regions. One I already mentioned, the Environment for Europe, where we work together with UNECE. The other is the Intergovernmental Commission on Sustainable Development for the Central Asia countries that UNEP has been organizing. And definitely we are looking into seeing how these bodies can feed into the processes to avoid duplication, to build on existing instruments, so that we can have the right platforms for the regional governance of sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank everybody very much for giving us your views, your insights on this new sustainable governance structure, and also your views on the part and the role that the UNECE region can play. And in fact, I have some very good news for everybody from the Executive Secretary of UNECE, who invites everybody in the room, and the stress is on everybody, to the 8th floor restaurant, where from 6 to 8 p.m. there will be a reception. And I'm delighted to say that it's now 6 o'clock, but before you all head out of the door, I would like to give the final word to Mr. Mano, the Ambassador of Israel.
I would like, first of all, to thank our moderator for a most professional conduct of the sessions, and also all the panelists who have taken part in this panel on sustainable development governance. It has been a very interesting and thought-provoking debate. I'm confident that these discussions will serve as a very useful input from the ECE region to the global processes in relation to the follow-up to Rio +20 and post-2015 development agenda. A summary of the two panel discussions will be circulated in the room, most likely in the second half of tomorrow. And with these remarks, I close panel B and item 2. As our moderator has said, there will be now a reception on the 8th floor. We shall all meet there. Tomorrow, we start at 10 o'clock with item 3. Thank you very much, Good evening. This meeting is adjourned.